much of the cure that we're seeking is connection. Connection is the medicine. So if we are choosing to build a culture of mental health based on connection, then leaders need to model openness to connection. And that means vulnerability. The truth is, we are all on a mental health journey, including me, including you, including all of us here and every human being on this planet. So today, I appreciate your witnessing of my journey and the learnings from it. In 2018, my sister passed away from heroin addiction, a condition that is treatable with Ibogaine therapy, but not currently available in the United States. She was 44 years old. She was brilliant, creative, incredibly funny, and so very loved. She tried heroin for the first time when she was 17 years old in an attempt to escape from the trauma we were experiencing at home. At the time of her passing, my family believed she had overcome her addiction. My sister also believed she had overcome it. She was in love, engaged to be married, and rebuilding her life. And then she was gone. I share this to say this work is not abstract to me. I am very present, as I know many, if not most of you are, to the suffering of those in the throes of mental illness and addiction, and all of their loved ones who suffer with them in their illness and without them in their death. We are all survivors of the ravages of mental illness, trauma, and addiction. We only vary in degrees of separation from it. Over the past year, Delphi has increasingly been approached by organizations working on Ibogaine who have asked for our help and expertise with healthcare and policy implementation. And honestly, this was somewhat puzzling to me, as I knew relatively little about this medicine compared to the other psychedelic-based therapies on which I had been focused. But then in May, I attended the first Aspen Ibogaine meeting hosted by the Americans for Ibogaine Initiative. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of seriousness and a sense of possibility sitting side by side. That small gathering of 50 people included individuals representing the full political spectrum in America. And by the end of our time together, everyone in that room agreed on one thing: that healing with Ibogaine needed to be brought forward and made accessible to all people in need of it, people like my sister. Experiencing that kind of consensus was like a shot in the arm of pure hope. Finally, we could all agree on something: that everyone deserves the chance to heal. So at that point, I decided that I needed to understand this treatment firsthand in order to make the most responsible decisions about Delphi's future direction relative to this treatment. I made this decision not as a seeker of a cure or a miracle, but as a healthcare CEO evaluating something that could be important. And also, I brought my whole self to it. Thanks to my loving partner, Steve Saporn, we documented the process carefully, including qEEG brain scans before and after my Ibogaine treatment. And we recorded pre- and post interviews about my experience, including my relevant trauma history and the changes to my brain from Ibogaine. All of this will be released on the Neuro's Journey podcast, which will officially launch on November 19th. And we'll put a link to that in the chat for anyone who's interested. Now, to be clear, Ibogaine therapy is a serious undertaking. It is not pleasant, but for me, it felt important. And unlike other serious medications like chemotherapy, which you would never give to a healthy person because it would make them sick, Ibogaine is not only safe when administered with the right medical supervision, but can also have benefits for individuals who are already in good health, like myself. This is something that is referred to as betterment of the well. which was revealed in my pre-post brain scans. My exploration of Ibogaine therapy was a mission of discovery. I went in with 3 questions. How does the care delivery model work, especially related to safety? How does Ibogaine work to treat addiction and interrupt trauma-driven patterns? And should I, and should Delphi, direct meaningful resources and focus towards this area of emerging therapeutics? What I learned really surprised me. Now, regarding care delivery, the administration of Ibogaine is a very medicalized treatment, and necessarily so. When you're administered Ibogaine, as I was at the Beyond Clinic in Mexico, you are in a hospital room, in a hospital bed, with an IV in your arm for fluids and hooked up to an EKG machine, with a doctor and a nurse in attendance. There is no doubt you are undergoing a medical treatment. But this medical treatment sits inside a behavioral health container, much like a substance use disorder residential treatment program where patients typically stay for up to 2 weeks during their course of Ibogaine therapy. So there's this yin-yang balance between a powerful allopathic medical intervention that is held within a highly relational and gentle behavioral health intervention. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. Now, cardiac monitoring matters. And in the program I experienced, it was handled with great rigor. So I received several EKGs throughout the program, and this was very reassuring. It gave me the confidence that cardiac safety is manageable with proper standards. Some other things that surprised me: providers of Ibogaine therapy can deliver this treatment safely without having to take the medicine themselves. Many of my medical and behavioral health care providers at Beyond had never experienced Ibogaine themselves, and all of them were excellent. You could not tell who had taken it and who had not. Also, with Ibogaine, unlike other psychedelic medicines, there is absolutely no euphoria. There is no high. It is a very sober, if not uncomfortable, experience psychologically and physiologically, and therefore the potential for abuse or even recreational use of this medicine is very low. And finally, there's no flood of oxytocin with Ibogaine. And this is important because it reduces the potential for interpersonal boundary violations that can occur in other forms of therapy, including psychedelic therapies. So there's no guruizing or aggrandizing of the treatment providers. They're just treatment providers, like in any normal healthcare setting. So with the proper standards of care and standards of training in place, the treatment as I experienced it does seem viable for integration into our existing healthcare system. Said another way, it is possible that our healthcare system and the current resources within it could potentially be retrofit to provide Ibogaine therapy at scale. This is now Delphi's working hypothesis, which we aim to test rigorously and from many angles. Regarding my second question, how does Ibogaine work to treat addiction and interrupt trauma-driven patterns? I believe, as the research also indicates, that the combination of psychological insight and the induction of physiological healing and growth within the structures of the brain itself present a powerful therapeutic dyad. I experienced both. For me, Ibogaine brought forward an awareness of a deeply ingrained addictive pattern, which I previously just couldn't see or acknowledge. While under the influence of this medicine, I became aware of a lifelong pattern of overfunctioning, an addiction to being needed, driven by a belief that safety and belonging come from meeting other people's needs before my own. This belief and behavior kept me safe in childhood. But It had become terribly expensive in adulthood, costing me my health, many relationships, and my joy. Seeing it clearly as a vestige of my childhood trauma helped me release it. And the behavior change was immediate and with mindfulness has been durable. It's now something that I just can't unsee. And I have found that my choices and what I perceive my choices to be are just different than before. I have more choice, and I choose my own well-being. It's really that simple. I also experienced indications of changes in brain function. For example, I have lived with a mild learning disability, causing a misalignment of my eyes while reading. Following Ibogaine therapy and according to my ophthalmologist, this misalignment has fully resolved. My eyes now align properly when I read, which has made reading much easier and more enjoyable. Finally, like many who have reported their experiences with Ibogaine therapy, as I have also found taking new perspectives and adopting new healthier behaviors to be noticeably easier following the treatment. These changes align with what we see in the literature around neuroplasticity and reopening of the critical period as described by researcher Gould Dolan. Now, there were also what I could describe as possibly unwanted symptoms, possibly symptoms of neurogenesis, such as noticeably slower cognitive processing speed and a reduced tolerance for sustained concentration for several weeks following the treatment, making time off work essential. I am truly grateful to the team at Delphi for supporting me during the many weeks I was at reduced capacity for having undergone this treatment. I couldn't have done it without them and without my family and doctors supporting me strongly. And this points to the likely need for significant structured support following Ibogaine therapy, both to maximize the window of neuroplasticity to promote positive change and also to minimize potential adverse outcomes. So what does all of this mean for me now, professionally and for Delphi? Under the influence of this medicine, this question triggered a commonly reported experience often called life review, which for me appeared as a slideshow of scenes from my life. A very good example of this experience is depicted in the recently released documentary about Ibogaine therapy called In Waves and War. It was just released on Netflix 2 days ago. It's very educational and a very engaging film, and I highly recommend it, and we will make sure that it's in the chat for easy access. The scenes of my life that presented themselves were of the terrible impact that addiction and trauma have had on my family for generations. It showed these conditions at the root of much of my family's suffering to the present day. And with tremendous clarity, it unambiguously made the answer to my question self-evident from a personal point of view. However, and more importantly, my family is not unique. There are millions upon millions experiencing their own version of suffering due to the very illnesses that Ibogaine therapy may treat, illnesses for which we do not have good treatments at this time. There is a massive unmet need. Ibogaine therapy, on the other hand, shows a combination of a strong safety architecture when properly managed, a care delivery model that may well fit within existing clinical environments, and signals of unique therapeutic potential. It is worthy of serious evaluation for potential system-level adoption. So while my personal history clarified the stakes, ultimately this decision, whether or not Delphi will focus on Ibogaine, is made through a strategic public health lens and with the input of several high-ranking healthcare leaders who sit outside of Ibogaine and psychedelic fields. One of these healthcare executives, Mike Emerson, said something poignant that really stuck with me. He said, "Look, Leah, you know very well that if this has a shot, then payers and healthcare system leaders need to be part of this conversation early. And they need the specific information that they require to be clear and direct and given to them in their language. And he's absolutely right. The psychedelic field, broadly speaking, does not naturally speak payer language or actuarial language or provider network language or liability language. And that's okay. That's why bridges exist. But we cannot ask the healthcare system to adopt what we haven't prepared them to understand. So today, I'm announcing the launch of the Ibogaine Healthcare Policy Institute within Delphi. The Institute will serve as a vital resource for decision makers in the healthcare system with special focus on care delivery and payer stakeholders. As a non-advocacy organization, we will prioritize these stakeholders' specific needs for clear, precise, and actionable information. Following structured, evidence-based methodology, we will map and mitigate risk and build consensus around exploration of viable implementation pathways. And in doing so, we will help the emerging field of Ibogaine therapy and the incumbent healthcare system communicate in a shared language and achieve their common goals. We are not pushing adoption. We are preparing the ground so that if the evidence continues to support it, the payer and care delivery system can appropriately evaluate and then responsibly and efficiently implement Ibogaine therapy. Delphi and the Ibogaine Healthcare Policy Institute, or IHPI, are currently engaged in early work and also exploring additional projects in the US, in Canada, and Puerto Rico. And when the time is right, we will use our policy platform in Europe to support stakeholder discussions there as well. This is a multi-year effort. All of the pre-work relative to insurance coverage, credentialing, liability frameworks, economic analysis, and more, these all take time. So we are beginning that work now. We invite you to explore the IHPI website. There you can read more about our mission and our advisors, including Dr. Andrea Barthwell, former White House advisor on substance use disorder, who initiated FDA research into Ibogaine, Dr. Leith States, the former acting U.S. Assistant Secretary of Health, Dr. Kenneth Tupper, former senior staff of the Canadian Ministry of Health, and Eric Bailey, former director of substance use disorder programs for Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, now Elevance, which is the third largest commercial payer in the US. Each of our founding advisors has been chosen for their rigor, ethics, and their deep domain expertise and accomplishments in healthcare delivery and policy. And they're also just very cool and fun to hang out with. In the coming months, the Institute plans to release comprehensive industry reports, as well as economic and policy frameworks relative to payers and healthcare systems. And we will begin the essential stakeholder engagement and information sharing to lay the foundations for what can come from clarity of purpose and skillful coordination of expertise and consensus building. We are well equipped and ready for this task. And we're excited to share this news with you today and to bring developments in the future. Thank you for being here with us and for how you show up in the world. If this message resonated with you, if you found it hopeful or informative, I invite you to do two simple things. First, when you receive the follow-up email with the session recording, please forward it to at least one leader in healthcare or policy decision maker, including elected officials, who might be open to or should be open to hearing about Ibogaine therapy. Second, as you move forward, please consider sharing your own mental health journey in whatever way feels appropriate and authentic to you. You may never know whose life may be improved or saved by your sharing. And thank you for being a part of a conversation today that I believe will shape the future of healthcare in meaningful ways. We're just at the beginning, and I look forward to continuing this dialogue together. We'll now open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Leah, for sharing this very personal story. It's very moving, and it's great to see that intersection between the personal life and the professional and the next steps we're taking with Delphi.
Thank you, Flores.
And I see we have our first question here from Lynn Marie Morsky. She, of course, appreciated what you've shared. And her question is, what type of therapist qualifications do you think will be required to sit with patients during Ibogaine?
That's a great example, Lynn Marie. Not surprised it's coming from you. Thank you so much. Great example of the type of question that the Institute intends to solve and resolve through consensus building of the field. So I am not going to answer that question today, but you are demonstrating already an orientation to what the healthcare industry, the information that the healthcare industry needs to know, and that we need to come together to decide and share with them in order for Ibogaine therapy to even possibly be implemented. So it's a great question, and look forward to being able to answer that with clarity and precision in the future.
Thank you, Leah. And I think one thing that you said that surprised you is that the care providers themselves don't need to have that experience themselves, which of course is a topic of discussion within psychedelics, that you want the therapist for MDMA or for psilocybin to have that experience. I think in this case, you were saying, at least in the current state, how it's being done, that might not be something that's necessary.
Correct. And this will require, again, a deeper dive. Do all, would it, for example, there were some of the care providers at Beyond who had experienced Ibogaine therapy, but many of them had not. And I was so surprised. I literally couldn't tell. I'm pretty fussy and discerning when it comes to healthcare and certainly behavioral health services. And the care providers, be they medical or behavioral health, would have to reveal, and they were open, but reveal to me whether or not they had the experience before themselves. And so I thought that seemed extraordinarily hopeful that a significant number of the workforce, if not most of the workforce, would be able to hold this care skillfully without having to actually experience the treatment themselves. And yes, as Flores, as you say, this is a topic of great debate within other psychedelic therapies. And I feel that within Ibogaine therapy, there's good reason to explore training without that being a conflicting point.
Yeah, thank you. We already have four more questions. But just to add to that, I think there is really a challenge in training therapists and getting that approved to be a study or to actually do that. So I think not having that be a hard requirement, I think that really helps in terms of implementation.
I just want to say one other thing. It's very important that folks understand that I am sharing my experience. And what we know is that there's so much more that we have to find out together. So please do not take any of my experiences as a policy position of IHPI or of Delphi. That would be the opposite of what we're accomplishing here. We're just opening the door and just beginning the journey. There is a blank canvas ahead of us.
Thank you. Catherine Lawson, do you believe there's an ideal period during that window of plasticity following treatment that guided integration of an Ibogaine experience should be received?
Catherine, thank you for the question. I think that you are asking about what is believed around the window of neuroplasticity following the Ibogaine treatment. I have heard, and again, someday I hope that I can direct you to the IHPI website to read all of the information and the research specific to your question. My understanding is that there is a window of about 2 weeks where the medicine is actually still, the metabolites are still in the system, and then a month-long window of really extraordinary neurogenesis happening that extends out to 3 months or even beyond. Something that we believe, and now I'm referencing Gouldolan, is that Ibogaine, of all of the known neuroplastogens, Ibogaine seems to have the longest window and perhaps the greatest amount of neurogenesis that it invokes. So that gives us, and you well know as a clinician yourself, the adoption of behavior change. That 3 month window is actually really ideal. There's something, and we know from the behavioral health research, 3 weeks and 3 months to set new patterns. So we're looking at a time frame when it's easier to adopt new beliefs, new behaviors, and really strongly set oneself on a new trajectory for health and wellness, even if you had been in an extraordinarily rough place before. That's just a bit of an elaboration. And again, these are the types of questions that we look forward to having specific answers, not just for this audience, but for the healthcare system decision makers as well.
Thank you, Leah. Then a question from David Repkin. Can you talk about the Texas initiative? Maybe some
Oh.
technical details about its current or probable design, its operationalization, and to what extent this Texas model could become a blueprint for other states and for federal levels to emulate.
Oh, what a great question. Thank you for calling that in, David. Yes, the legislation that passed through Texas is functioning, it's working. So this is what's gone on. The state of Texas released an RFP, essentially wanting to administer the money that was set aside for a consortium or consortiums of organizations that were going to address myriad research focuses, everything from studying Ibogaine itself to engaging payers. So it was a very robust RFP, and there were submissions that were sent to the state. Those have been all sent to the state. The deadline has passed, and the state, we believed the deadline was November 1st, but we haven't heard anything yet. The state will choose which of those consortiums will win the RFP. At that point, that consortium will be responsible for identifying the drug developer that they will partner with for the medical research. And at that point, the other $50 million that needs to match, so the private funds that need to match the state funds have to come forth. And I think the just street wisdom is that the drug developers will probably produce this 50 million, but we'll see how that happens. As of right now, what I can tell you is this week in Aspen, there will be representation from 22 other states looking and considering passing legislation of this nature. What's incredibly interesting is that the greatest progress has been made in some of the most conservative states, including Mississippi. So we have legislation that's very similar to the Texas legislation. It's intended to be very similar to the Texas legislation. There is intended to be a pile-on effect to create a critical mass of research to move these medicines forward as quickly as possible. And I really respect and honor Brian Hubbard and Governor Perry and Claire Stapleton and Louis Davidson, all of the people, all of the incredible folks who are working on the American Ibogaine Initiative who have got this legislation moving, and it really is starting to have its own gravitational force. I'm so looking forward to the outcomes of the Aspen Ibogaine meeting and seeing how many more states are going to fall in line with passing this legislation in the near future. So the short answer to your question is yes, Texas is absolutely a template. We would expect other states to follow a similar process with the RFP and the public and private funds to move the research forward. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Leah. Then the next question is from Kevin Lenzo. Who are our greatest allies in this journey to implement Ibogaine into the healthcare system? Nonprofits, political groups, indigenous stakeholders, etc.
What a great question. There is a shockingly diverse group of people who are invested in this medicine coming forward. As I mentioned, the diversity that I encountered in Aspen last time. And since then, we have seen strong interest from Indigenous, including Native Americans here in the US and First Nations people in Canada. I think what we're wanting to open, we want that question to help us find the answer within the incumbent systems. So we know veterans, right? Obviously, very much on board. The Psychedelic Caucus in the House of Representatives, very much on board, both sides of the political spectrum. Our work within IHPI is to answer that question in terms of who in the healthcare system and in the payer system are our greatest allies, and to call them to the table and to work with them to move things forward in any way that we can that takes into consideration what their needs and motivations are. I believe often what happens is we think of the payers and healthcare systems and so forth as our adversaries, and that is just not the case. It has been my experience that when the right information is brought to these decision makers in the way that they need it to be brought to them, these are other human beings. They want to make good decisions for other humans' well-being, and they will if they can. Kevin, I really appreciate that conversation and that question, and look forward to that being a grand exploration that we get to embark on here with the Ibogaine Healthcare Policy Institute. And we're open to suggestions of where we should be looking. I just want to put a fine point on this. We definitely would expect that patient advocacy groups, NAMI, and so forth, will be advocates. Our role is not patient advocacy. Our role is to work with the incumbent system players and be considerate of them as stakeholders and make sure that they have what they need in the process so that patients' needs can have a seat at the table.
Thank you, Leah. And then the final anonymous question. What help is Delphi looking for in the launch of IHPI?
I'm really quite serious in the invitation to forward the recording. A personal introduction or encouraging decision makers in the healthcare system just to pay attention. Hey, this is something that should be on your radar. That's a really good place to start. And I'm also really sincere in the sharing of our own mental health journeys. Someone did that favor for me and changed the trajectory of my life through the sharing of their story. And we all have that power to help one another. So that too. And then lastly, I would say, stay tuned. We're so excited to get to bring developments to you as they happen. If you would like to engage with us directly, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to have conversations about this. If you have ideas for stakeholders that we should be talking to, we would love to hear that, or certainly questions or concerns. We're just at the beginning here, so the door is open.
Thank you so much, Leah. So I think that's about the end of our Delphi Insight session. And I'll leave a few last words for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Floris. And again, I just want to take a moment to thank the Delphi team and our founding advisors for the Ibogaine Healthcare Policy Institute for creating the opportunity that we have to support this medicine in coming forward in safe, and effective ways, to everyone who is working in healing modalities. Thank you. And to everyone who is present here today, we feel your presence with us. It supports us and it helps us. Just the fact that you would take the energy and the time to be with us, please know that is felt. And we send back to you our good energy for all of the good work that you are doing. Together, we're building a better world, piece by piece, conversation by conversation. And we love doing this with you. So we look forward to seeing you at a future Insight session. And please bring a friend.
Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you everyone for being here. We hope to see you again on December 3rd.
Thank you, Flores.